welcome to another special episode of LA Rams Central. I'm glad you guys liked the crossover episode with me and LT. If you didn't know we did it, or if you haven't seen episode 67 yet, it is a crossover between me and LT, so go ahead and check that out. This is another special episode. It's just me flying solo, no Eric, no LT. It's just kind of me. Going to run through a few things that I think are going to go down. As week 11 approaches, we're a little bit beyond the halfway point, and I think that there are some developments that I think are going to happen that I know a lot of people probably don't. I think it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. So I'm going to be going over those. This is going to be broken up into three segments: potential upsets to look out for and why. Again, all of these but one, maybe two. All of these but two I picked. Although I won't be surprised if these happen. I think these games are upset alerts. Segment 2 is going to be watch out for these teams to make a run at the postseason, followed by my shocking playoff picture for some. I think it might be a little surprising for some, both NFC and AFC. And then I'm going to wrap it up with segment 3 with the Rams and Vikings, one final recap as I get ready to do my live call-in with LT as he does his live podcast or live broadcast, or whatever you want to call it. So that's going to be basically the breakdown. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into segment 1 with potential upsets and why. And the first upset that I really have on my radar to look out for that I want to talk about, it's not the number one upset to look out for, that's the next one, is Chicago at Detroit. The reason I say this is because while Detroit is a much better football team at home than they are on the road, there is no question about it. The Chicago Bears bring defense and a running game, much like the Rams did in 83 through 86 with Eric Dickerson when they had no quarterback until Jim Everett finally got the start against the New England Patriots in the second quarter of, I believe, week 10. And then he finally had a quarterback, but he wasn't there to see him develop. In Chicago, they have a quarterback they hope, but he's not getting a lot of playing time. But Detroit lives and dies by offense. And the Bears live and die by defense, which makes this game, I think, a pretty interesting game. I almost wish they pushed this back a week. I'd much rather see the Bears and Vikings on Thursday for Thanksgiving than the Vikings for a second year in a row. I think third time in 5 years. It seems like they're always on Thanksgiving now, and I don't necessarily like that matchup, although they are 1-2 in the division right now. I actually think that the Minnesota Vikings defense, as good as it is, I don't think it's better than the Bears defense. I think the Bears defense had to deal with a lot more adversity than the Vikings defense as far as short fields, better opponents, inconsistency at the quarterback position. Nothing the Vikings have had to endure to this point, which is why I think this is an upset, or could be. Now, I picked the Lions to win, but if I sit there and look on my phone tomorrow and find out, or if I see on the bottom line at the conclusion of the Ram game that the Bears turned around and won the game, remember I said this because it's not a surprise. It is an upset, but it's one of those upsets that I'm telling you to look out for because with the Bears running game and the Bears defense, I think they can put a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and I think they can get the job done. And if the Bears get a pick six, that game is over. So keep your eyes open on that. The big one on the docket for me is Washington over New Orleans. Don't be surprised if this happens. This has all the smellings of a trap game. The media overlooks the Washington Redskins and has completely written them off, and that's a mistake, and I'll get to that later. And the New Orleans Saints know they got a big game coming up against the Rams, and there's a lot of talk on whether or not the game should be flexed. When I hear players on another football team say that game should be flexed, it alarms me a little bit because you've got the Redskins coming in your building who beat Seattle, and you're worried about next week's contest against the Rams being flexed or not. You're not hearing the Ram players talk about that. And maybe that's because they got a very real opponent, the 7-2 Vikings, that they're looking excuse me, that they're looking at to take the field. I don't know if the Saints are overlooking the Redskins, but it sure as heck feels that way. And even if they're not overlooking the Redskins are a team that will beat you. They've already proven that. If they could stop Kamara and Ingram and force Drew Brees to throw into the teeth of their defense, which I think is their strength, Unlike a lot of teams in the NFL this year, the Redskins are built from the back end front, meaning from the secondary all the way up to the defensive line. Their strongest suit is the secondary. Their next strongest is the linebacking core, and then you go ahead and can go to their D line. Their front seven is not the strength, but the back seven is, or the back eight, if you will. So I think that's something to really be mindful of, because if the Saints are forced to throw the ball, it's not like it's a pick your poison. You can't stop this if you can stop this. If they can stop the running game, it's going to be a problem for New Orleans, because I think D'Angelo Hall will have a pick in this game. I think Josh Norman will have a pick in this game, or at least a forced fumble, maybe even a fumble recovery. I think Drew Brees is going to get hit a few times. This game, to me, I was this close to picking the Redskins. Not just because I like the Redskins, but because I really think this is a trap game for the Saints. New Orleans should win this game. They should be able to run with monetary success, which should still allow for Drew Brees to catch him on play action and utilize his wide receivers and get the ball downfield. And Kamara is a talent. There's no question about it. But remember, the Redskins contained Kareem Hunt when he was going off. They relatively bottled him up. And that was the game where they were really getting injuries left and right before that game, and then, of course, during that game and after that game. So I'm curious to see how this game breaks down. So I think that's definitely got to be upset alert. I'm saying the Bills over the Chargers is an upset to look out for, only because first of all, it's two teams that aren't having a very strong year in the Chargers, and the Bills seem to be in flux right now with spiraling out of control with two bad losses in a row. I'm not saying the Bills aren't having a good year. They're having a really good year. But when you switch quarterbacks, a lot of people immediately want to jump ship and go, well, there must be problems in Buffalo. And there are. But I don't know if we can really say for certain whether Nate Peterson is going to have a good game or not. And I think that then makes it a potential upset, because everyone is picking the Chargers from what I'm hearing. And, if Peterson has a big day and ends up tearing apart the Charger defense, that's a potential upset right there, because the unknown factor is the Bills quarterback. And with a rookie quarterback, you're going to force LaShawn McCoy to run the ball more. And let's face it, the Chargers are going to tee off to stop the rookie quarterback on the pass rush, and this is going to be the game that you might be able to gash him for a run. So play action pass could be a big part of this game too for the Bills. So I just think the Bills should be on your upset alert special, because if this kid performs at a high level or even a moderate level, and the running game performs, it's game over for San Diego. Oakland at New England is my upset pick of the week. I think this is a must-win for the Raiders, and I think the Patriots are kind of going in there thinking they've got this wrapped up. Another bad AFC opponent. We should roll. This shouldn't be a problem. But remember, New England doesn't stop the run very effectively against teams that run the ball well. New England's defense is one of the worst defenses in the AFC playoff picture right now. They may be the least talented and certainly the worst statistically of any of the teams in the playoffs right now in the AFC. And that is not a recipe for a Super Bowl run. I think the Raiders are going to get could pull a victory here. I think Derek Carr is a good quarterback. He's a really good quarterback. That offensive line is starting to play a little bit more cohesively, allowing less sacks, although they still have holes. But the running game, for me, it's going to come down to Marshawn Lynch and his ability to run the ball. If he runs the ball, the Raiders will win. If he doesn't, it's going to be a shootout, and then that's anyone's game. But New England's defense doesn't scare me enough to sit there and go, oh yeah, Tom Brady can handle his business. Of course Tom Brady can handle his business. Can the Patriots defense handle theirs against a really good offense? I don't think they can. So this is an upset, and this is an upset special. Keep your eyes on it. Could be a big win for the Raiders, and it's a must-win for the Raiders. The only other one is Atlanta over Seattle. Anytime you lose two talented players in your back end and you're playing a passing team, that's a problem. LT, if you're watching this, I do disagree with you on Matt Ryan being a overrated quarterback. I think Matt Ryan is an appropriately rated quarterback. I hear some people put him in the elite category, so I understand why you make that statement, but I don't put him in the elite category. He's a talent, plain and simple. Elite, maybe not, but he's definitely in the second tier of talented quarterbacks, to be sure. And it's not his fault they lost a Super Bowl to New England. That's on Shanahan. So those are the upsets to look out for. Second segment I'm kind of excited about. Watch out for these three teams to make a run at it. I'm going to explain why here first by going over the schedule. So right now the Detroit Lions are in second place, and they're kind of on the way out, a lot of people think. But Stafford's already proven what Stafford can do. And when we look at the Detroit Lions schedule, actually, instead of it being so noisy, I already learned that lesson last time. I'm going to go through this really quick. So what they've got next after Chicago is Thursday night against Minnesota, a team that they've owned. They beat Minnesota in Minnesota 14-7 earlier this year. And whether that's Teddy Bridgewater or not, I don't think it's going to make a difference for the Detroit Lions. Then they go to Baltimore. And the Ravens are a better team at home. But if their defense can't stop Stafford, that's going to be problems. I think there's a potential for a loss there for Detroit. But then that's really it. They go to Tampa Bay, home against Chicago on Saturday on December 16th. They're at Cincinnati, and then they go they're home against Green Bay. Other than the Ravens game, I don't see another loss on their schedule. And I said that this could be a potential upset, the Bear game. But let's say that the Lions take care of business there. If they only lose one more game down the stretch, that's 10-6. And I don't think the Vikings are going to finish 13-3 or even 12-4 or even 11-5. Now, it's possible they can go 11-5, and if that's the case, then it's going to switch my playoff picture just a little bit, meaning the Vikings would be in. But the Minnesota Vikings, if they end up 10-6, it's going to be an interesting situation. I think they will end up 10-6, in which case the Lions get the tiebreaker because they beat the Minnesota Vikings. So that'll be an interesting turn of events, to be sure. So I actually will go into this Viking schedule here really quick because I need to explain my playoff picture. When I look at Minnesota right now and I look at their schedule and I see at Detroit, I think that's a loss after the Rams, so there's 4 losses. At Atlanta, I think that's a loss, right? So now you're 5 losses. At Carolina, that's a loss, so now you're at 6 losses. But then they've got Cincinnati, at Green Bay, and Chicago. So barring a complete failure, they should finish 10-6. But the problem is, where are we at? Oh yeah. But the problem is for them, losing to Atlanta could be a tie-breaking situation that eliminates them from the playoff picture. Although Atlanta has a tough stretch down the road as well, so we'll have to wait and see. But the Detroit Lions are definitely a team that you should be looking out for because their schedule bodes really well. And if they can pull a victory over Baltimore, then you're talking 11-5, potentially even 12-4. So, because again, just really quick on that. Sorry about this, guys. Just want to make one other statement on that. Yeah, I mean, looking at their schedule, as I said, barring an upset this week, obviously this would put them at 5-5. Then they could potentially go 10-6, but I think they win this week, even though I have them on upset alert. So what happens then if the Lions end up going 11-5 because they lost to Baltimore? Well, they're definitely going to beat out the Vikings. So just something to look out for. Another team that I have on upset to look out for, I should say, is the Washington Redskins. Now, I want to read to you the Redskins' schedule down the stretch. Mind you, their defense is getting healthier, and we all know as Ram fans how good the Raider defense really is. Listen to this. After New Orleans, which potentially could be their 6th loss of the season, and I think a lot of people rightfully are thinking that, although if they pull the upset, this changes the complete dynamic of what we're talking about. After this game, they have the Giants on Thanksgiving, win. They have They're at Dallas the following Thursday with no Ezekiel Elliott, and the Redskins are not going to get swept by Dallas 2 years in a row. I'm sorry, they're not. That's a win. Then they go to San Diego. That's a win. Then they're home against Arizona. That's a win. Home against Denver. That's a win. And then at the Giants to end the year, which potentially could be you win and you're in situation, which I think they will win. So I look at this schedule and I go, really after this game, you're talking about a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 game winning streak that very easily could happen. You've got the Giants who have only won once, twice. You've got the Cowboys who have no Ezekiel Elliott. You have Denver who's a mess. The Chargers who are a mess. And the Cardinals are probably their toughest team on that schedule. And it's funny that I bring the Cardinals up because that's the third team I'm telling people they need to look out for. And the reason I'm saying that, and I can't believe I'm saying this even, is Blaine Gabbert. I live here in Arizona. I saw Blaine Gabbert play in the preseason. Before you say preseason doesn't matter, I remind everyone of Dak Prescott. I don't want to hear preseason doesn't matter. Preseason matters when you're in a good system and you're learning that system and you've got a coach who knows how to connect and reach out to you. And I'm sorry, but Arians is a phenomenal quarterback whisperer. And when I look at the Cardinals' schedule down the stretch, they've got it rough. I don't think they're a playoff team, but they could make a run at it. Being at Houston this week, it should be a win. Going to Jacksonville, that's going to be a tall order. That's going to be a loss. Then they get the Rams. That's going to be a tall order. That's going to be a loss. But then after that, Tennessee's a winnable game. Washington's a winnable game at Washington. The Giants are a winnable game. And at Seattle, the Cardinals give the Seahawks fits in that stadium. And I don't think Seattle's a very strong team. And they barely beat Arizona last time they played. And that was with Richard Sherman in the lineup. So, I'm looking right now, the Cardinals have 4 wins. That could be 5, 6, 7, potentially 8, 9 wins on the year. 9-7 puts you in the picture. Maybe 10-6 if they could pull an upset somewhere along the way. And as much as I love the Rams and as much as I think the Rams are going to beat the crap out of the Cardinals, that's going to be a revenge game. So I don't think it's going to be 33-0 the next time they play. Don't be surprised if that's like a 22-7, 22-10 type of game. I think the Rams will still win, but I don't think it's going to be by the same margin. And the difference in this stretch, in order for this to happen for the Cardinals, has to be Blaine Gabbert. They have a good running back. David Johnson, I remind people too, is going to be back in a couple of weeks. He wasn't put on IR and injured reserve for the season. He was supposed to be out for 11 to 12 weeks. Well, we're rapidly approaching that time. So David Johnson's back in the lineup. You've got Adrian Peterson, Larry Fitzgerald, who just got a contract extension. For those of you that don't live in the Arizona area, you need to know that Larry Fitz looks like he's going to be back for at least one more year. And then you've got Blaine Gabbert, who I think is a more accurate passer right now than Drew Stanton. I think he's got as strong of an arm as Carson Palmer. And I dare say I think he's a little bit more accurate than Carson Palmer. Look, when I watch preseason games, I watch specific things. I told you guys Jared Goff was going to have a good year based on what I saw in the preseason. And I think the same about Blaine Gabbert. And I've been saying when the Cardinals get smart and they decide to go with Blaine Gabbert as their starting quarterback, it's going to be oh crap time in the NFC West because the Cardinals will come roaring right back into the picture. That time is now. This first game will be a good indicator on how right or wrong I potentially could be, but it isn't the end-all be-all on how right or wrong I may end up being. This is a rough stretch. At Houston, home against Jacksonville, home against the Rams. That's tough. Staying home against Tennessee, the Titans aren't a very good road team. I think that's a winnable game. The Redskins in Washington, the Redskins are hot and cold, and they definitely don't play as well at home as they do on the road. Giants are awful, and Seattle is overrated. So there's a potential there for an 8-8, 9-7 season, so just watch out. Now, I want to surprise people with my shocking playoff picture. Here's how I see the playoffs breaking down right now if somebody were to put a proverbial gun to my head and say, you pick the playoffs right now. This is my playoffs, and my wild cards are all messed up. I got the Eagles as a 1 seed. I got the Saints as a 2 seed. The Rams lock up the 3 seed today. I've got the Lions as a 4 seed overtaking the Vikings for that home playoff game. I've got right now a battle between Minnesota, Washington, and Atlanta for the wild card. Only 2 are going to get in. Right now, I'm going with the Vikings are in against the Lions, and the Falcons are in against the Rams. I will not be surprised, however, if that 6 seed, actually, if the Falcons are in, Vikings would be at the Rams, Falcons would be at the Lions. I could also see it being the Vikings and Redskins, in which case the Vikings get the tiebreaker, so it would be Washington back in LA for the wild card, and Minnesota home again, or Minnesota at the Lions. So I could see it unfolding that way. Again, if you're going to put a gun to my head, I'm going to say Redskins at Rams, Vikings at Lions is your NFC playoff picture. Your AFC playoff picture looks a little bit like this. Chiefs are the 1 seed. That's right. I said it. I think they're going to lose no more games down the stretch. I think they're going to figure out how to utilize this offense. I think their defense is legit. And when you look at their schedule, let me go back to that real quick. Their schedule bodes pretty well for the Kansas City Chiefs. They've got the Giants at New York, home against Buffalo, at the Jets, home against Oakland, home against San Diego, home against Miami, and then at Denver. I don't see them losing another game. So that's 13-3. I do see the Patriots losing one more, potentially even this week. I do see the Steelers losing somewhere down the stretch because that's not a 14-2 team. I think they lose 2 more games down the stretch. I don't know where those 2 losses are going to be, but the Steelers are so unpredictable, I don't think anyone can accurately predict it. I've got the Patriots as the 2 seed. I thought that'll definitely be one of the Steelers' losses against New England. I got the Patriots as the 2 seed. I got the Steelers as the 3 seed. The Jaguars as the 4 seed. I've got the Titans at the Jaguars, and your 6 seed, the Raiders at the Steelers, which I think will be a really fun wild card game. That's how I see the AFC playoff picture right now unfolding based on the schedule and how these teams have played. Again, I could be totally and completely wrong. So there you have it. Now, the Rams. I want to talk about the Rams a little bit. Segment 3, I'll make this quick. I'm hoping this will only be 5 minutes. First of all, I want to make a correction. In 1974, that was when the Rams had the false start. Harris was the quarterback. He was over 200 pounds. They had McCutcheon, who was over 200 pounds in the backfield, and they had their fullback at the time, who was over 200 pounds in the backfield. A lot of beef. They said somebody moved. The Rams play-by-play guy was, I want to say, Dick Enberg, and he was like, no one moved, no one moved, no one moved. And he was right, no one did move. You can go back and look at the film, and to this day, I don't know what the official thought he saw, which is funny because you watch football today, and the amount of times I've seen people move and not get called this year has been mind-boggling, and it's been since week 1. So the fact that in 1974 they thought someone moved that didn't is a little upsetting, and it did cost the Rams because it moved them back, and they tried a running play which got them back to the 3, and then on 4th down they decided to go for it instead of kick the field goal, and it was a pick, and they took it almost all the way to the house, which set up a touchdown in that game. In 1976, the Rams decided, frigate, we learned our mistake in 74. We're kicking the field goal. It was blocked, and they took it all the way back for a touchdown to give them a 10-0 halftime lead. So a little frustrating moment there for the Los Angeles Rams against the Vikings. And again, Cliff is so right. There's so many X factors. In 69, the Rams were playing Minnesota in a playoff game, and they had a 17-7 lead that they blew. They ended up tying it at 20. They ended up taking a 21-20 lead, and then late in the game they got a safety on Roman Gabriel. The Rams had a kick, and the Vikings never gave the ball back, and the Rams ended up losing 23-20 to a team that they probably should have beaten in what was a relatively close game. So I wanted to clean up a little bit of that history to be sure. Look, there's a reason I'm picking the Rams against the Vikings. When you do the breakdown, and let's do the breakdown quickly, and I'm sorry I don't have graphics yet. I'm not computer savvy. I'm just a guy in a garage talking to you about football, and I hope that's a format that you guys can appreciate and like. I would love to do graphics, and I will eventually when I learn how to do this, but for right now, this is a personal conversation between the fans and me, okay, or football people and a football guy. When I do the breakdown and I look at this and I ask myself, be intellectually honest, put your bias aside. You've got the Rams offense, okay, which is the number 1, number 3 offense in the league against the number 5 defense in the league. Can the Vikings get pressure on the Rams quarterback? Absolutely. But the Vikings aren't going to be able to go full bore tee off on the Rams quarterback because they'll get hit with draws and screens and shovel passes and all kinds of funky formations and not trickeration, but well-devised plays to beat the rush. The Vikings are going to have to be responsible. This notion that they can beat the Rams front five with their front four is wishful thinking. Sullivan and Whitworth are unbelievable, and they'll lock it down. And if they do get some pressure from a guy or two, they'll double team them. And if they double team them and they still get pressure, again, the analysis of Jared Goff coming out of the draft was he had Joe Montana-type mobility in the pocket. I agree with that. He can get out of the pocket and make plays with his arm. I remind people, when he rolled left, okay, or he rolled this way and threw back across his body a laser beam against the Redskins for a completion. He's done that a few times this year. He has the arm strength to boot that people do not give him credit for. I think Jared Goff's going to have a big day because I think the Vikings are going to take the same approach everyone else does. They're going to put 8-9 in the box, and they're going to stop Todd Gurley because they think that that is the lifeline of the Rams football team. And in years past, they were right. What Todd Gurley is now is a cog in the machine. And that machine is run by Jared Goff. So the Vikings have to pick their poison. Do they put 7 in the box and say, we're going to beat you with our front 7 and get annihilated by the running game? Or are they going to put 8 in the box and say, we're going to stop your running game and get burned in the passing game? Are they going to try to mix and match it, allowing for Jared Goff to use play action to beat him deep? This is a lose-lose situation for Minnesota. I don't think their front four are going to be good enough to just get pressure on their own right on Jared Goff. If they do, that changes the whole dynamic of this football game. The other aspect is, should the Rams be worried about a close game before half? No. We already know we can do second half adjustments. So now, let's look at the Rams defense, which is a top 5 defense. I think they're third in the league, while their offense is first, against the Vikings' 5th-ranked offense. The Vikings' offense is 5th-ranked, but who have they played? The Rams have played against some pretty darn good quarterbacks. Dak Prescott, Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson. I mean, that's just to mention a few. They've seen some pretty impressive running games in Jacksonville. So they've seen it all. So I don't think they can sit there and look at the Vikings offense and pee down their leg. Now, the Vikings will put points on the board to be sure, but are they good enough to beat the Rams, defense? I think Aaron Donald can wreck that. Unlike the Vikings, the Rams can get pressure with their front 4, or their front 3, for sure. And Brockers is having a big game, as LT beautifully stated in our crossover show. He's kind of an unknown X factor that exists. Aaron Donald's a game wrecker. And Longacre, who I've been toting since the Cardinal game going to London, is a phenomenal football player. And he's a great depth guy. Then you look at our linebacking core and forget it. We're loaded back there. We've got athletes that can go sideline to sideline and cover the pass. And we've got good pass rushers on the edge. Secondary-wise, John Johnson has been a linchpin on this defense. Watch him. He is a born leader, and he is going to be the Rams safety for the next 10 years, maybe 12. I expect him to have a pick in this game. So I'm telling you right now, John Johnson will have an interception in this game. Tremaine Johnson may finally get one of his patent sticky cover corner picks. And I just think that 2 picks in this game is going to be too much for the Vikings to overcome. Your X factor in this game, though, as I said before, is the fact that the Rams know Case Keenum. There's always an X factor in these games. And that X factor is Case Keenum. The Rams know him well, but he doesn't know this Ram team well at all. This is a completely different dynamic. So I think those 2 interceptions by Case Keenum are going to be, we know what you're capable of, and you're trying to do something we know you can't, and we're going to jump it, pick it, and run with it. That's your X factor, which is why I'm going to stick to my 34-17 pick. I wouldn't be surprised if it was 34-13, 34-10, but I do have the Rams winning this game 34-17 at the moment. Gentlemen, ladies, that's a wrap. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll be on LT's show later, his live thing later today with a call-in, so you'll hear my voice probably on the phone, but you won't necessarily see this ugly mug on the television or the computer. Again, guys, thanks for watching. Thanks to all the subscribers. Please feel free to comment below. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. And remember, go Rams!